Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam from Historic Travels and welcome to another video. Okay guys, so hey, one of the most frequently asked questions from anyone who is even remotely interested in the story of the Titanic has always been, is it possible to go to the bottom of the ocean and raise the wreck of the Titanic and return her to the surface? Well, to put it bluntly, no. After being at the bottom of the Atlantic for so long, the Titanic has deteriorated so much that the ship is just barely holding itself together as is, and any attempt to lift the ship up would result in an immediate collapse of the entire wreck. However, despite this fact, that hasn't stopped people from trying to think up ways where it may be possible to raise the wreck of the Titanic. Now, just so you guys know, I, for one, even if it was possible, am not interested in raising the wreck of the Titanic. The site is a tomb, and I think the site should be respected. I am okay with them retrieving artifacts from the wreck because it preserves and tells the story of everybody who was on board the ship on the night she sank, but as far as raising the wreck completely, I don't think that's a good idea. Now, there are no plans to try to raise the wreck of the Titanic. However, as I was reading the proposals of ideas where people were like, oh, hey, this might work, I thought they were amusing enough, and honestly, I couldn't believe some of the stuff that I was reading, that I thought I would make this video sharing with all of you some of the crazy ideas people have proposed to try to raise the Titanic with. Anyway, guys, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video, and I hope you enjoy. Now, surprisingly enough, the first time somebody actually proposed trying to raise the wreck of the Titanic actually happened just a few days after the Titanic went down. I know, shocking, right? You see, there were several wealthy families, some of which include the Guggenheim and the Astors, and they wanted to raise the wreck of the Titanic and return her to the surface. They wanted this so bad that they actually contacted this salvage company and told them, hey, try to raise the Titanic. And surprisingly, this company said, sure, we'll look into it. However, they soon abandoned the project for two big reasons. The first issue was no one knew exactly where the wreck of the Titanic was. They had a general idea as to where the ship went down, but they weren't 100% certain. And the second issue they faced was the extreme depths that the wreck of the Titanic currently rested at. The Titanic is 2.5 miles beneath the surface, and submarine technology at the time was extremely limited, and they had no way to reach the wreck of the Titanic due to the extreme depths and pressures that they faced trying to go down that deep. Now, when they realized that it was impossible to raise the wreck, they actually proposed another idea. I could not believe it when I read this. This company proposed dropping dynamite on board the Titanic wreck and then just blowing the whole thing to kingdom come. Now, the reason they proposed this was, you see, they thought that if they blew up the wreck of the Titanic, then it would free the bodies of all the victims of the disaster still trapped within the ship, and then the bodies would float up to the surface, and then they could recover the bodies and give them all proper burials. However, they soon abandoned this idea as well because they thought that the extreme pressure at those depths would have just crushed the bodies. As it turns out, this is incorrect. Any bodies that went down with the Titanic, well, because they were full of water, the pressure actually wouldn't have crushed them. They would have been preserved for a little while until they just decomposed over time. But if they had somehow blown up the wreck of the Titanic, number one, you would think a blast that big would vaporize all the bodies. But number two, if they got lucky and somehow did free some bodies from the wreck, well, due to the fact that water had completely filled the bodies would not float up to the surface. They would in fact just get blasted out of the wreck, and then they would just lay back down on the bottom of the ocean. Now, the next proposal I found, and this one honestly made me laugh a little bit when I read about it, was to, I kid you not, fill up the Titanic with millions upon millions of ping pong balls. And then the buoyancy generated by all of those ping pong balls would then lift up the wreck of the Titanic and return the vessel to the surface. Now, this idea has a good number of flaws in it. Number one, due to the extreme pressure around the wreck of the Titanic, those ping pong balls will be crushed long before they got anywhere near the ship. And honestly, how would you even get them down to the ship in the first place? I mean, use a hose or something, but then again, the hose would be crushed by the pressure. Yeah, there's a lot of problems. And even still, let's pretend, okay, you did somehow manage to get millions and millions of ping pong balls that could withstand the pressure inside of the wreck of the Titanic. Well, as I stated earlier, the second any lifting force is put on the Titanic, the whole thing would just crumble and fall apart. So yeah, this idea would not work at all. Oh, and even if, okay, so here's an idea, and let me know what you guys think, okay? Let's pretend you have ping pong balls that can withstand the pressure, and number two, the Titanic's hull was in good enough condition to withstand a raising attempt. Imagine how much pressure those millions and millions of ping pong balls would put on the top decks of the Titanic, okay? This part of the ship that is not designed to hold that kind of pressure. Wouldn't, like, as soon as the ship started to be lifted, wouldn't all of those ping pong balls, like, simply break through the ship's top deck and then just float back up to the surface and the ship would fall back down again? I mean, yeah, this wouldn't work under any circumstances. Now, surprisingly enough, Mythbusters actually tested the ping pong theory on a much smaller ship, and they basically sunk a small ship right on a dock, and then they pumped tons and tons of ping pong balls into it, and surprisingly enough, they were able to refloat the ship. So the ping pong ball theory does work on smaller vessels under very specific circumstances, but in the Titanic's case, yeah, there's no way. Okay, so this next idea that I'm going to tell you about, well, the guy who came up with this idea was approaching the problem of raising the Titanic with this type of thought process. He was thinking, well, if an iceberg is what caused the Titanic to sink, I got it! We can use ice to raise the Titanic! I know, brilliant, right? I kid you not, essentially what this guy wanted to do was freeze the entire wreck of the Titanic in this solid ball of ice, and then once the ship was completely frozen, because ice is less dense than water and it floats, the ice would literally pick up the Titanic and return the vessel to the surface. Now, the way he proposed that this could be done was to cover the entire wreck of the Titanic in this, like, bag or like a balloon or something that they could use to contain the water around the wreck, and then they would pump liquid nitrogen inside of this balloon and freeze all of the water around the Titanic, and then this now iceberg Titanic would then float up to the surface. Now, some people did study the practicality of this idea and see if it was even remotely possible, and as it turns out, the amount of liquid nitrogen required to attempt this was, I kid you not, 500,000 tons of liquid nitrogen. Yes, you heard me right, 500,000 tons. And also, how would you even get that much liquid nitrogen down to the bottom of the ocean in the first place? And it would destroy the Titanic to go through all that. But yeah, anyway, obviously this idea didn't sit well with anyone, and it was quickly abandoned. And the ideas just go on and on from there. I mean, guys, I kid you not, there are so many proposals out there on how it may be possible to raise the Titanic that I'm just not going to be able to go into all of them in this video. Ultimately, what people did decide to do was just simply bring up artifacts from the Titanic, because those artifacts could be used to, you know, tell the story of the Titanic and remember all of those who lost their lives when the ship sank. One company set out to raise a big piece of the Titanic's hull that broke away from the ship during the sinking, and they were successful in doing this. This piece of the hull is now known as the Big Piece and is currently on display in Titanic museums. Now, I'm not going to be going into the full story of the Big Piece in this video. I actually did cover that in another video. If you would like to watch that video, I will include a link to that video in the description below. Please watch that video. I think you'll enjoy it. But yeah, now all of you watching this video have now heard some of the crazy ideas that people have proposed to try to raise the wreck of the Titanic. Well, if you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next official Historic Travels video. Y'all take care. Special thanks to my Captain level Patreon supporter, Tammy Lee. Thank you so much for all the support.